Hi, I'm Dave, and we are out here with the new Axial Base Camp and the Traxxas TRX-4 Sport. And these two have been compared a lot online, and we finally got our hands on one. So I'd like to compare the two, the pros and cons, specs, and things like that, because they are definitely the two to be compared. Alright, so the new Axial 10.3 Base Camp and the TRX4 Sport, there are quite a bit differences on both of these vehicles. Overall appearance, the Base Camp, it is very reminiscent of the Axial Honcho body, so there's plenty of 3D printed aftermarket stuff out there for that body, or it is very similar to the Proline Metric body, which also has a ton of 3D printed aftermarket stuff out there from Knight's Customs or download your own files. It is one piece where the honcho was only the cab, but I'm sure you can cut that off. There's definitely some things there. The plain, boring, one solid color is a little bit boring and leaves some to be desired, but it does have some stickers for the windows. You can take those off, and there are ways you can give it clear windows. But going over to the TRX4 Sport, it is very similar as far as stickers on the windows, one-piece body. The truck is just kind of a generic truck. It doesn't really look like any other specific truck out there. But the Traxxas does have a good amount of accessories and aftermarket stuff out there for this body. They got the roof rack, they got light buckets, they got all kinds of recovery stuff you can get for it. And overall, bodies look pretty good. The height on everything is pretty good. Another thing to note is that the Base Camp actually has a little bit more ground clearance than what the TRX4 Sport has, and basically it's not only with the suspension, you can see it cycling, but these tires are actually 4.7, where these tires on the Sport are 4.6. So these guys are a touch taller, which is going to be nice, giving you a little bit more ground clearance. And yeah, definitely pro there. So both these vehicles are the base model for their respective platforms. The SCX10 III Base Camp is the base model for obviously the 10.3. Retails for about $389.99, where the TRX4 Sport is the base model for the TRX4 platform, and retails for about $369. And so that is the question, is we are going to break both these vehicles down, take body off, go through each thing, and compare the two, pros and cons of each, look at the specs, and find out if that $20 difference is warranted. Alright, so now we're going to rip these bodies off, and we're going to show you what's underneath. So let's pull that body, and let's check out these chassis. Alright, so now that we got the bodies off of both of these, you'll see that there's a lot less plastic than what is on here. While they both have metal chassis and everything, there is a lot more room for moving around, a lot more room for activities. So the big thing on the Base Camp here is that they actually give you a battery tray on the side if you want to run a small battery pack. That's normally what I run. Or you can mount it in the back, which isn't exactly the best. In my opinion, I really wish that they would have mounted something up front. That's really where a lot of batteries are going nowadays. You know, on the other vehicles, on the other SCX10s, is where we always used to put them. Where on the Sport, the battery tray is pretty centralized. It's right over the transmission, which is really nice, really convenient. It'll fit a standard size battery pack. There are plenty of aftermarket stuff to lower the battery tray and do other things. On some of the other TRX4s, they actually have a battery tray up front if you really want to do that. So pros and cons between the two. I mean, this one definitely gives you more options. You could probably modify it to mount the battery up front. On the Sport, you really only have one mount, but it is a good location. So, moving on to the transmission. This new transmission, um, this new transmission is a 5-gear transmission inside there. You can actually change the gears to allow you to run the straight axles or the portal axles, which is nice, and it keeps everything centralized and good, and in the middle keeps everything well balanced, and allows you to build off of that. It's a pretty good platform overall if you are wanting to get into competing or just build up your own truck. Where the Sport has a little bit better features, or some good features, I should say. The transmission, it's really low profile and actually puts your motor up front, which is nice. The front weight bias is really nice. Both these vehicles weigh 5 pounds. This one, I do believe, weighed about 5 pounds exactly, where this one weighed just over 5 pounds. 5.79, somewhere around there. But a lot of that weight is up front on this, which is nice when you're crawling. That's definitely something that you want. So, since we're talking about transmissions, we'll talk about the motor. The Axial comes with a 35-turn 540 can, which is plenty of power, gives you plenty of wheel speed, especially running on 3S, where the TRX-4 gives you a 550 can, which is a larger can, which gives you more torque, and is a 21 turn, which gives you a little bit more speed, but when crawling, speed isn't always the name of the game. Alright, so let's talk about the electronics, shall we? Starting with the ESCs, the TRX-4 Sport has the typical high voltage XL5, which is capable of up to 3S, only with this motor. It's got nickel metal mode, it's got low voltage cutoff, so you can run lipos. It's got sport mode, training mode, and crawl mode. It's got a couple different modes, which is great. The Axial has a Spectrum ESC. It can handle up to 3S. It's waterproof as well as the XL5. There are modes to put it in nickel metal for lipo, things like that, but all of the settings that are going to be comparable to that, as far as changing to like training mode and give you a little bit less throttle, are actually going to be on the controller here. It comes with a Spectrum SLT3, and all your little switches are going to be on the back to switch 50% throttle, 75% throttle, or 100%, which gives you a little bit more options than what the Axial does. It really just, the Traxxas does, and that is, training mode puts you at 50%, and that's it. That's all you need. But both speed controls are waterproof, which are great. The servos, so if we're talking servos, the Spectrum 614S puts out 201 ounces of torque. It's all metal geared. It's waterproof, so it's pretty strong. And it has a 23-tooth spline servo horn on it, which a lot of aftermarket servos have 25-tooth. Which, moving over to Traxxas, they use 25-tooth spline. This one has a metal gear servo. It's got the 2075X, which is only about 175 ounces of torque, so it's not quite as strong. But if you swap out your servo, you don't have to buy a different servo horn. I do recommend getting a metal one, where this one comes with plastic, where this guy comes with a metal one, which is nice, but again, you're going to have to swap that out if you get a better servo, like a Reefs or Savox or anything like that. So now moving on to the last electronic component, and that is the receiver. On Traxxas, comes in a waterproof box, which is great. They have been using these waterproof boxes in all their vehicles, and they hold up really good. Where Spectrum or Horizon, Axial kind of decided for some reason to not put their receiver in a waterproof box, even though their other components are waterproof, which is a little bit disappointing. I mean, that's not saying that you can't waterproof it yourself. You can't put it in a balloon. You can't put it. You can still put it in a box. Or if you just want to buy this, and like I mentioned plenty of times before, build it as a competition truck. That's another side of the hobby that is a ton of fun. Most comps you go to, there's not really much water, so it doesn't really matter too much. And one thing to note, since we do have the body off, is I mentioned that this bumper is super close to the body, which is great, but you do get a little bit of tire rub, which is unfortunate on this truck. And that's just because they have the bumper pushed all the way in. You can actually loosen up the screws and push it out. I'm going to run it as is. I'm not going to change a single thing. On the Sport, you don't run into that issue because the bumper sticks out past Wyoming. So another little side note thing is the servo mount on the Axial. They actually give you other options, so you can run a servo winch. They give you a couple different spots for that, which is great, because mounting a servo winch isn't always easy, and it's just a good little addition. Where on the Traxxas, it's something you have to buy separate if you want to mount servo winch somewhere. So, but moving on, we'll flip these trucks over. Both vehicles use portal axles, which are great for ground clearance. Again, this one I think the Axial has a little bit more ground clearance over the Traxxas. Looking at the links on the Axial are a little bit smaller than what come on the Traxxas, which are okay. It does kind of give you a little lip at the end of the rod end, but so does the Traxxas. I really don't see it getting hung up too much, at least not what we run on here in Michigan, where everything is just wet all the time. So they did a really good job, I think, with the links, and overall, me personally, I like the design of the Axial portals over the TRX-4 portals. I just feel that they are a lot less bulky. And me personally, I haven't had any issues with either axle. So, yeah. Alright. Both these vehicles have shocks, as do most. The Axial actually has some new style shocks. Well, say new, I think that they're just new shock caps. But it's got aluminum shock caps, threaded shock bodies, and they're pretty nice. Most of Axial shocks I find to work better with stiffer shock oil. Me personally, I like the truck to have a little bit stiffer ride, and this truck is a little soft, at least for my liking. But I mean, there's plenty of adjustment. You can always change shock fluid, things like that. The TRX-4 Sport, it's a little on the stiff side, but honestly, I've always liked the Traxxas shocks. The Traxxas 2660 with mini T springs, perfect comp springs, perfect comp shocks. Check them out. But the TRX-4 shocks, they actually did a pretty good job, and I really like those as well. Not saying that the Axial ones are bad by any means. They just, anything you get that's ready to run is going to need work. Alright, so the last thing we're going to talk about is these tires. Again, like I said, these are 4.7 inch tires, where the Traxxas is 4.6. There are plenty of other aftermarket tires out there that are taller. But from the factory, both these feel pretty good. In my opinion, I think that the Axial ones are a little bit more squared off, which can hurt you. But they still feel pretty good. Um, they feel just as soft as the Traxxas. I mean, honestly, the Traxxas tires have been pretty proven, um, ready to run crawler tires. Where I believe that these are new Wild Peaks. Um, these are a newly designed tire. The old Wild Peaks back in the day were, I don't want to talk about it. But these ones actually look and feel pretty good. So I can't wait to get these out on the rocks. We are going to be running same battery in both of these vehicles, 2 cell, 5200 milliamp Gens Ace battery packs. We're going to be running both of these in here, and let's get them on the rocks and see how they do.